on modern day grandparenting. We are a unique group, the three of us. Some of us have little children, some of us have middle-aged children, and some of us have just the most wonderful stories about grandmothers. So I'd like to start by introducing Mary Adler.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. My name is Mary Adler, and I'm part of Georgetown Village and happy to be here. When I was invited to do this, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, why? I'm an outlier. And I think it was Pam who said, you're not an outlier. And I said, what I am, because I'm not a mom and I'm not a grandmom. But then I thought about it, how ridiculous. I adored my maternal grandmother and I enjoyed writing about her. And then, let's see, I interviewed 30 additional grandchildren who adored their grandmothers. So I guess I do belong here. I wanted to tell you just a few things about myself. I was born in a snowstorm on Thanksgiving Day a long time ago in Hartford, Connecticut. I grew up in West Hartford, and I have a sister, an older sister, and my mom and my dad. I adored working with older people from the age of 15. My father built what was called in those days convalescent hospitals, which are similar to what we call SNFs, which are skilled nursing facilities or, assisted living. And he would take me with him. I was 15, and he'd go in on a Saturday, and then I would help pour orange juice and milk to the patients. And that's when we left the first time. I told my dad, I think I want to work with older people. Well, now I'm one of those older people. And it's true, throughout my career, I adored working with seniors, hence the grandmother. As a teen, as I said, I grew up in West Hartford, and I also went to junior college in Boston, completed 2 years of school, and stayed up in Boston for about 16 years, loved it. That's when I learned to work in hospitals with 4 Harvard affiliated hospitals. I only had a 2-year degree, but I was usually an administrative assistant to a chair of pediatric GI, pediatric infectious diseases, or the non-invasive diagnostic cardiac lab, all these famous people who were quite, I would say, modest. And I really was spoiled in many ways. In the meantime, I wasn't as close with Nana because my mother took ill with MS, and probably the worst case I've ever read about or seen, for sure. And it was really rough for all of us. I have a sister and a dad, and of course, my mom. My grandmother at that point was marvelous as always, and drove from Connecticut where she lived, and also she lived in Manhattan, and she would drive herself. In those days, it probably was 5 hours to get to West Hartford, and was a great mother, a great grandmother, but still, I really didn't know her as well. I can tell you she had 9 grandchildren, and I was number 3 in line, and my sister was the first. And she also had 4 children, 3 daughters and a son, finally a son. And every one of her children adored her. I really got close with Nana when I was 22. And I must say a few things about my mom, and then back to grandma. Mommy was a linguist, and her favorite language, she spoke 4 languages, was French, as it is mine today. And she looked very tall, big bone. I was very small, and the only small one in her family. But she was quiet. I'm not like her in that respect either. Very cerebral and very kind. And she couldn't do anything. She couldn't stand. She couldn't read, write, communicate in any way. And it was really rough for her. She died at 49, and my grandmother's other daughter, who was younger than my mother, she also died, ironically, at 49. So here we have my grandmother with 2 children now, the first and the last, and still amazingly strong and positive. Nana was ageless. If there was one word to describe her, it would be ageless. And whether it was going to school when she lived in Greenwich Village, she went to school and had friends. Two of them were my friends who were in law school very near NYU Law, but really ageless. She loved to play the piano. And when I visited her, wherever she was, it was always Moonlight Sonata. And that's when I started thinking, I think I'm going to write about my grandmother. To this day, I feel bad I never told her that, but maybe she knows that from heaven. And I did write a unique book, which I still haven't seen anything like this collection. I wrote about my grandmother and why she was so important to me. But also I met with 30 other grandchildren, mostly adults, and 2 of them were at 90 years of age. And also I discovered that there were 10 countries outside the US where there were grandchildren whose grandparents were from these unique countries. If you had a thumbtack, it would almost cover the world, these 10 countries. So you had Sweden, you had Russia, grandmothers from Russia, South America, Thailand, you name it, France, Italy, the usual, to show that it really doesn't matter where the grandmother was born, what religion, the mores of the grandchild, the whole thing. It didn't matter. What really matters is the love, the simple love that the grandmother gives the grandchild, which stays forever, forever. Nothing can change it. And then I wanted to be more specific. Let me read you what Nana would tell me every time, because I got very close with her when I was 22 until about 33 when she passed away. So while I only had 13 years in my memory of her, they're all very vivid because I was an adult. Unlike when I had Mom, which is very important, from birth to maybe 14, where, you know, I really could communicate with my mom and that she with me. So here are the little things that are so grounded for my grandmother. She would have been 127 years old today if she was alive. And a young grandmother, she was 50 when I was born, and 50 is young to me today, but also 46 when my sister was born. Here's what she said: enjoy the little things in life that are free, that we all take for granted. Listen to the sound of wind and the ocean. She always wanted me to read Shakespeare because she loved his works. Eat healthy, stay trim. She believed in a strong work ethic, and so do I. So did I. Stay positive. To be alive and enjoy each day is the greatest gift. She adored the piano, and I can still hear her playing Moonlight Sonata, whether in New York or Connecticut. Give back to people who are not as lucky as you. Give to causes that you believe in. And she and Grandpa were living proof of that mantra. She always told me we need to look at what we have in life as opposed to what we do not have. She taught me the difference between gift and a loan. She would say, if I give you a $1 bill, that's a gift. But if I loan you $10, I expect you, Mary, to pay me back. She loved to hug, and especially when I arrived in New York or Connecticut, she was always waiting for me at the end of a driveway with her arms full out, waiting to hug. And also, if I got out of the elevator in New York, she'd be standing there with the door open. Very special for me.
That's
Thank you.
Oh, Nancy, it is such warm feelings I'm getting from your telling me about your grandmother. How lovely. Great memories.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll be back, Mary, to you. Nancy, would you like to tell us something about your grandparenting experience?
Yes. I am the oldest of 3 children. Something special about my childhood is that my mother was legally blind from birth until I was 10 years old. As I said, I was born in Massachusetts, and I lived there from birth through the end of university. I have a bachelor's of science in chemistry from Boston College. I was married to John Wall for 29 years. We have 2 daughters, Catherine, who is now 38, and Sarah, who is now 31. After university, John and I moved to San Francisco, California, and we worked 15 years for Chevron. I worked full-time for the chemical company. He worked for Chevron Research. John traveled extensively during those years, and I found it very hard to manage a home, children, and a full-time job, and a very difficult commute. The traffic is bad in San Francisco, and we lived out in the suburbs. We then moved to Columbus, Indiana. John took a job with Cummins Engine Company, but he traveled even more. And this time it was international travel rather than domestic. He was gone for weeks at a time, mainly in Asia. I stopped working at this point. Our girls graduated from high school in Columbus, Indiana, and promptly moved out of state for college and beyond. Catherine went to Princeton and then graduate school at Georgetown University and began her career in Washington, D.C. Sarah went to the University of California, then moved to New York City for graduate school at Columbia, and then began her career in Washington, D.C. I did not have a close relationship with my grandparents, mainly due to my mother's blindness. My paternal grandparents did not approve of the marriage and really viewed my mother as a burden. And my mother's mother objected to my mother having the surgery because she felt that people would say, why didn't the Cronins do something about this when Kathleen was younger? And when my mother decided to go ahead and have her eyes were done separately, so there were 2 separate surgeries. The fact that my mother went ahead and decided to have the surgeries, that severed the relationship with her mother. Her mother really never spoke to her again. My children did not have a close relationship with their grandparents either. We lived in San Francisco and Columbus, Indiana. My parents were in Massachusetts. John's parents were in Southern Alabama. We saw each set maybe once or twice a year. I decided a long time ago, and my children, I don't think were even out of the house, that I was going to break this pattern. Once Catherine and Sarah were on the East Coast, I moved to Washington, D.C. It was a leap of faith. I didn't know anyone here other than my daughters, but it was so important to me to remain a close family, to be able to help each other, and of course, to play a major role in the lives of my beautiful grandchildren, Nate, who will be 5 in a couple of weeks, and Rebecca, who's 2. My home is a second home to Nate and Rebecca. Catherine and her husband, Johannes, work full-time, and I have always taken care of Nate and Rebecca 2 to 3 days a week. During the COVID pandemic, they've been here more often. My daughter, Sarah, has also lived with me for the past 8 months because she was evacuated from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, where she was working on a USAID project. And she was unable to get back into her condo because she had rented it, expecting to be gone 2 years. So I've had a house full, but I enjoyed every minute.
Thank you, Nancy. And you said it was helpful actually to have Sarah with you.
Yes. Well, she helped me with the kids because they were here most days. I took them most days.
And she worked from home. From your home, and she helped at lunch and to help get one of the kids down for a nap or something. Yeah. We are all different in how we come to being grandparents and our roles. My grandmother she lived an hour away from us, my maternal grandmother, but once a week, my mother would drive my sister and I, and we were my sister, who's older, was number 1 grandchild of 13 to this grandmother, and I was number 3. And I consider myself very lucky that I was high up on early on in her life, because some of the other her grandchildren don't have such fond memories as I do. She was sadly widowed at the age of 40, and she had 5 children, all still at home at the time that her husband passed. She had only a high school education, and I'm a little fuzzy as to whether that was really true or not. However, she on that one day a week that we would go visit her, my mother would come into the apartment or her home, and we would be listening to the radio, and they would talk about the Wall Street Journal. After about an hour of catching up with what's going on in the business world, we then went over to McDonald and Sons, which was a brokerage house. And we would sit in the lobby, and in the lobby, there was a ticker tape going around the upper edge of the walls. And we would sit until they saw whoever, whatever companies they were interested in following. And we did that for 20 minutes or a half hour. And then we would do the ladies thing. We would go shopping at Lord & Taylor's and go out for lunch. And so she lived to be 86 years old. She maintained a beautiful home and in a beautiful apartment. She bought a brand new big Buick every 2 years. And when she died, and she had been in a nursing home for a few years towards the end, she still had money left in her estate. So she was a wonderful role model. And for me, particularly as a single mom, and how you manage your life. I mean, I am a nurse practitioner, and I taught at a collegiate level, and then later I was in private practice. But she would talk to us. She didn't play games, board games or card games or any of the other things that a lot of us do with our grandkids, but she would talk to us. And that, I guess, was very important. I have 4 grandchildren, 2 girls, 2 boys. They range from 5 to 12. And my daughter, who lives in New York City, and they were all born while I was working. And she would call me early in the morning, like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and say, I think today's the day. I'm getting cramps. And can you come? Can you come to New York? So I would call my partners to see if I could get the day off, and 2 days off. And I would take the train. And yes, I was in every birth room for all 4 children. I feel very lucky that I was there to be supportive of my daughter. My daughter really was showing signs that she might have some postpartum depression. So in the literature for postpartum depression, they talk about the need to have more parenting or someone of support. She had a very supportive husband, but having a new baby. So I would go up every Friday afternoon and come back either late on Sunday and come or early on Monday for a full day, for a full 5 days of work. I did that every single weekend for the first 6 months. And I got a lot of criticisms from my friends. Why are you spending so much time up there doing this and that? But when that child is born, there's something instantaneous. I never thought it would be instantaneous, that you love that child so much, and you just know that you have to be a part of their lives. So I'd go to New York. They were very generous and are successful themselves. Twice a year we'd go on fancy vacations, Europe, Colorado, Florida. Recently, I've been to Bermuda for 3 weeks, and my friends would say, oh, it must be wonderful. What plays did you see? What restaurants did you go out to? What are you doing? Now, it does sound like a lot of fun, however, going out to meals at a restaurant with 4 children is not fun. When we would go to Colorado for the for us to ski. It's not much fun just going to the kids slope, bringing the kids to and from the kids slope. And if you've ever had a child who, after you've gotten the hat and the mittens on and their snow boots on and zippered up, ready to go, and they say, I've got to go to the bathroom. And there you are back. It's a lot of work, but as I've said, I really have enjoyed it. My daughter works from home. She has a full-time nanny. She has a housekeeper and a chef. So what am I there for? I am there for the children. And being there for the children, I am supportive of my daughter, and that's what's important to me. My second daughter doesn't have any children, but does have a 4-year-old mini Labradoodle, just a cute little thing that my partner and I, Chuck, took care of for 6 months last spring and summer when she was working and traveling. Oh my, did we hate to see that dog go back to my daughter, Sarah. So I have 2 children, and I do try to spend a lot of time with my daughter that has children. But there is a sibling rivalry. How much time do you spend with Amanda? How much time do you spend with me? And so that's kind of ongoing. So I do try and make a real effort to send birthday cards when at her dog's birthday, the dog gets a present. At the holidays, the dog gets a present. And so, because this dog is very important in her world. So over the years, I've chaperoned many, many play dates and birthday parties, particularly when the children are young. But now, well, they came, their father is asthmatic and very fearful of getting sick in New York City. So, and one of the children also has asthma. So they went to Arizona for 2 months, and then the COVID numbers got high in Arizona. So they came to Virginia and lived about 15 minutes away from me. And up to that time, the kids have, 3 of the kids were in virtual school. And the 10-year-old daughter, Eloise, has ADD and a hearing cognitive learning disability. And she was doing very poorly. My daughter, who was trying to work, and the businesses were going downhill so fast, so there was a lot on their plate. So I said, I'll take Eloise. So Eloise would come over, and she would be there at 8:30 in the morning. And maybe you can show Lynn one of the pictures of her sitting. She'd come at 8:30 to 3:30, and she would sit at the desk. At the dining room table. She would have the mini Labradoodle in her lap, and she would sit there and stroke the dog. And the class would be for 20 minutes or so. And I knew what the schedule was. And I was sitting at the same dining room table doing, reading or doing something on the computer. And she succeeded. She was very happy. When she did get up to take a break, she would go look for the cat. And having the cat and the dog, something for her to tactilely to be involved with, really worked for her. She did very well. There were 3 things that she liked to eat at lunch, and every day I would have one of those. And at the end of the day, if she were, as things would be, she would have a treat choice of either ice cream with toppings or piece of cake. She enjoyed it, and it was very successful. One of the other things I like to do, let's see, is there's the mini Labradoodle. Ajax is her name. Okay. So right at the moment, they're in Bermuda, and Bermuda does not have any COVID, because they are very careful about you have to have 5 negative COVID tests in order to remain on the island. So it's been great. And they're doing virtual learning down there now and things because the pattern and such, they're doing well. So we're all a little different. Here are some statistics to find who are the grandparents today. They say anywhere from 40-year-olds to 100-year-olds. Most grandparents have an average of 4 to 5 grandchildren, and by 2030, 70% of United States citizens will have will have great grandchildren. Grandparents spend an average of $2,500 annually on each grandchild. 70% of the grandchildren use common names as grandmother, grandfather, grandpa. 40% of grandparents are still in the workforce. Their work and personal schedules for hobbies, social life, exercise routines, home management, as well as the after-school activities for the grandchildren is the second biggest barrier to spending time with the grandchildren. The first barrier is distance. Many grandchildren like yours, Nancy, your grandparents live too far for your family to have access to them. According to research, 50% of parents have had disagreements with the grandparents over parenting styles. I know I really have at times have to be very careful surrounding eating habits, screen time, bedtime routines, and discipline. And it runs the range of being too tough. Sometimes I'm too tough on the kids for my daughter's preference, and other times she thinks that I'm too lenient or spoiling of the grandchildren. We need to find that it is their children and they are the ones that are in charge. There is a great article, 60 Things Grandparents Should Never Do, and I wish I had a copy of that as soon as my first grandchild was, or before my first grandchild was born. So that's kind of where I'm at. Nancy, what are some of the fun things that you like to do with your grandchildren? I think you're muted.
Sorry, I muted myself because my dog is chewing on a toy and I didn't want the noise to come across. I dropped my paper. I have a house full of toys because my grandchildren live so close, but I don't have anything that duplicates what they have at their own home because I want the time at Nana's to be special and unique and not just an extension of home. So Catherine and Johannes read to them a lot too, but I read a lot to my own children like crazy. We're all big readers. But I do read a lot of books. I do have a lot of books here for the kids. I have 2 books of simple science experiments for children. And this summer, we kind of worked our way through them because we could do them outdoors. They're messy. You don't really want to, and especially if it doesn't come out right, it steams over and stuff. But we did once or twice a week, we did a simple science experiment. My background is science, and so that's something that, you know, I can do with them. We play a lot of board games. They love Candyland and Chutes and Ladders. Nate's current favorite is Sorry, and Rebecca's favorite is Zingo. And I recently started teaching Nate how to play checkers. We've got a ways to go on that, but I purchased scooters and balance bikes for both kids, and they learned to ride them over here. Even though they live in Bethesda, which is a suburb, there aren't any sidewalks in their neighborhood, and it's a little bit hilly. where I live in Hillendale in a gated community, and Georgetown Court makes a complete loop and it's all flat here. So they learned to ride their scooters and their balance bikes at my house. And this summer, Nate learned to ride a real bike with no training wheels. And let's see, they spend a lot of, not this summer because of COVID, but prior summers, they were in the Hillendale pool every afternoon. And there's a playground here. What else did I do with them? The kid post in the Washington Post, starting at COVID, quite often had an idea for a project that you could do with your kids. So this summer we made bird feeders out of empty half-gallon milk containers. They had numerous projects that things you could make out of a sheet of newspaper. I have a sand and water table in my backyard, and we did a lot of, I have an old glass top table out there, and we did a lot of finger painting and messy projects out there. And then I just hosed everybody down afterwards. So I don't have the Paw Patrol toys and all that stuff that they have at their house. I try to have it be different here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Me too. I try to do a lot of reading with the children. It's one of the quiet things that I really do like to do with them. I remember when I first moved to Houston, Texas, and my children were quite young, and I'm from New York, and I was overwhelmed with the heat and humidity there. So it's like you don't want to go outside. So that first summer, we would every week go to the children's library and take out, I was surprised they'd let me do this, but upwards of 20 to 25 books at a time. They're small, they're little. And we would go through all of them and bring them back. And I went through 2 children's libraries going through that one summer, because it was just, and it's a great thing to do. And I'm happy to say my kids like to read today also. One of the things, Nan, if you would put up, Lynn would put up the picture of the gingerbread houses. A tradition that I started over 8 years ago was to make gingerbread houses and cookies with the grandchildren. And each child makes their own house. And there's the setup. It takes about 3 days to get to to the final product. And they are part of every bit of it. And there's a lot of candy that's consumed. And it started with getting, at Halloween, they collect a lot of candy. So having this project that we do at Thanksgiving, the long weekend of Thanksgiving, they are able to, they don't eat all that that Halloween candy then. And of course I have to buy more, but it's quite the project. And over the years, those are the traditional houses we make this summer, I did it when I went in October. We did our Thanksgiving tradition when I was in Bermuda recently, and we had been to one of the museums there, and there are a lot of sunken ships around Bermuda. And so the 7-year-old boy made a ship galleon. And so we've had ship galleon this year. We've had beach houses. We've had a junkyard. The little guy just started throwing candy. And so they thought that was hysterical because the backyard of the house was a junkyard of candy. So you never know what you're going to do with kids. You just kind of have to find out what their likes and needs are and go from there. Mary, would you like to tell us something else about your book?
Yes, I would. And Lynn, forgive me. I was going to ask Lynn to show the photos, probably one of my grandmother by her piano. And I had two other, I think a total of 3 pictures, Lynn had said. Is it too late to put them up? Even though, I don't know, can Lynn hear me or can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You can?
Yeah. Oh, there.
Thank you, Lynn. There it is. Thank you,
those are
Lynn.
great.
Yeah, I remember that day with the kids. Those are her 4 youngest grandchildren behind. Her sons, they belong to her, and they're the ones that are half Argentine, so they speak a lot of Spanish too. And that's my cousin Peggy. She was number 2 in line. And then there's me with Nana. That's in Manhattan, and I was about 30, I think. I was trying to figure that out. Also, well, thank you.
Very sweet. Very sweet.
I think there might be one other picture, but I'm not sure. I thought Lynn said 3.
Lynn, do you have the book cover? Were you able to get her book cover?
Yes, I have the book cover, and if you give me a second, I'll share the other picture as well.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
No problem. Just give me a second. Here's the other one. We love this picture, so let me share it.
Oh, I wonder which one this is.
Just give me a second.
Maybe the 2 of us. Yeah, I think.
Here it is.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Lovely.
There's a great story about that picture, but I won't go into it. Isn't that, it is great. It is great. No, she was with a whole group of other people. So I have a good photographer who took her head and her body out of that picture, or he removed everyone else. There's the cover, that beautiful cover I love.
Yeah.
That was my idea, and I have a great illustrator, so she just took my idea. And to show that grandmothers across the world, they're all really the same in one way or the other. The details are different, but the love is the same. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excuse me, I would love to see some pages inside your book.
Sure. Who's that? Is that
Karen Leith?
Oh, sure. I don't have the book in front of me.
Oh,
I do.
But yeah. Probably because I'm not in my home tonight.
I think Pam said she had. There it is, Pam. Let me highlight this.
Oh yes.
This is your grandmother, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you see the water? That's water behind her. That's up high. So we're up high, and that's Long Island Sound.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a picture.
Yeah, there is a book. There are a few books here actually upstairs. But,
yeah.
And I took the one with me kneeling that was just shown prior to the one, but there's another one that you liked, I thought.
Well, this is just another.
No, that's another grandmother from France. Yeah.
That isn't what I expected the inside to be.
No?
No, I expected it to be, well, grandmothers with grandchildren doing things, not so much copy.
No, it's a lot of copy to kind of highlighting the specialness of how that grandchild felt about that grandmother.
Right. Thank you.
Pam,
exactly.
how old are you? Oh, you wait all day for a doctor to call, and they call at dinner time. So I couldn't get myself together to get the lights on me and things like that, but I can work on that while we're talking. The grandmother is just so I don't know what the setup of this meeting is. Are we each supposed to talk about our grandmother experience?
I don't think so.
This is more or less, this is a panel discussion on modern day grandparenting. And so and really the emphasis came originally from Mary's book about grandmothers. And then the other 2 panelists, myself and Nancy, do have grandchildren. And so we were just going to try and set it up, showing the differences that each of us have to have because of our situation and our
yes.
families.
Okay. So you're designated speakers.
There are three
Oh,
designated
okay.
speakers, yes, but that
Three.
doesn't mean we're opening it up for questions or suggestions, or if you have a problem with grandchildren, would try and give you some hints and suggestions.
And we discussed at the end of the program, after our panelists were done, we will be asking participants if they'd like to share stories, and you'll have an opportunity then to share.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, good.
We're coming to the end. But Mary, tell us about your quotes.
Thank you. This is the most beautiful. There are 4 quotes from 4 out of 30, but I did want to throw something else in there that I forgot. I hope you forgive me. My grandmother also saved everything that her children, each of the 4, gave her. So she shared with me things that my mother at age 5 through 20 or whatever, and fabulous. So that connected me more. And then Nana also wrote to me once a week, and I wrote to her, and I have all her letters. That's all. It's just, there are many more things, but I forgot that. I'm sorry. So what I'm about to do is read 4 different sayings from each. These are quotes, direct quotes, just taken out of a whole chapter, that are really beautiful, that these grandchildren are saying about their grandmothers. And you just hold on. So here we go. There are only 4 out of 31. The first one: the most important thing about Granny and our relationship on an emotional level is it never felt like she was judging me. I could tell her anything and she would respond to me as a friend. What my grandmother left me is a love of life, to be creative and to appreciate every single day we have. The next: this is a British grandchild at age 90, remembering the war. Quote, there were so many great songs in the UK then. When we were going through World War II in London, it was actually a wonderful experience in that we were together and we had the same sense of humor, which has never been seen again in that same way since the war finally stopped. My grandmother was the love of my life. I adored her. She was a wonderful woman, gentle and with a great sense of humor. She was warm, not a show-off, and just got on with life. She was comforting, cuddly, and affectionate, and that is what children want and need. Third, a grandchild speaks of her Russian maternal grandmother. Enchanting, irresistible, inventive, impassioned, intransigent, indefatigable, incredibly trustworthy, incessantly depriving herself of everything for the comfort and well-being of others. My iron pole on which I would lean and never fall, the shoulder on which I would cry and would always feel comforted to carry on. And last, so beautiful, Grandmama was born in South Carolina, and just 30 years after the end of the Civil War. Her ancestors were 2 signers of the US Constitution, yet she never seemed to have knowledge of this. When she died, I had been married only 3 months to a man who was a prince in every respect. This pleased her immensely. She felt she would watch my life unfold from her heavenly opera box. When the news of her death reached me, I felt as though half the sun's wattage had been taken forever after. The first time I saw her favorite flower, a blue hydrangea, after her death, I felt she was trying to communicate with me. It kept happening. Grandmama's messages, quote, I love you, don't despair. Use your life as I did, to love, serve, and leave beauty in your wake. Beautiful. Poetry. Amazing.
It's lovely. Wonderful.
And yeah, thank you.
Nancy is a very active grandmother, as we hear, having her grandchildren in her home 3 days a week. What would you recommend? What is age related and helpful to have if you are hosting grandchildren?
No.
How do you, we can't hear you.
sorry. The dog is running around, so I'm trying to stay on mute so she's not making noise. I did purchase a lot of things because my grandchildren live so close and they are here often. So you have to buy car seats. I didn't realize it because people offered to give me car seats. They're only, after 3 years, they're not, what's the word? There's a new model that's safer, and they can't be passed down. You have to get the newest, latest one to be the safest. And that's really your big expense. Car seats are expensive. So I have 2 car seats. I bought a crib, high chair. I didn't buy any of the swings and things like that, because I felt like they're not here all the time, and they're not, they're not spending too many nights here. The one thing I didn't buy was a lot of toys. My neighbors who have grandchildren that are older now loaned me tricycles and a huge set of wooden blocks and toys that their grandchildren particularly love that they've outgrown. So I didn't really have to buy a lot of toys, but I did buy a stroller, car seats, a crib, high chair, those basic things. And I have loaned all this stuff out to different neighbors whose grandchildren are coming just for 3 days, and they don't want to buy, you don't want to buy a stroller for 3 days. But because I use them every day, I bought them.
Yeah. I would recommend also a library card.
Yeah, yes, we have that too.
Yeah. Well, Mary, one thing I want a little disclaimer here. We've talked, your book is about grandmothers. We have each, Nancy and I, have spoken primarily in our roles and talking about our grandmothers. I don't want it to be so lopsided that we haven't said anything about grandfathers. It is, there's my partner, Chuck, with his lovely 4 grandchildren. He's got a daughter who has the 2 sons, and he has a son that has the 2 daughters. And he is very active in grandparenting. He is on the phone with them. He is on the, videos with them. And he is very engaged in all their activities. They are almost in communication daily with one of them. So their grandfathers are very important in the lucky children that have grandfathers. I did not. I had a grandmother, and my other grandmother, her daughter had 12 children, and she lived next door to that daughter with the 12 children. And so, my sister and I were really excessive, and she loved us, I'm sure, but she really didn't have any time for us. But I'm getting back to grandfathers. I'm happy to say that. So Mary, would you tell us about National Grandparents' Day?
Yes, a lot of people don't know about this holiday. I was probably one of them, if you asked me a year ago or less than that. National Grandparents' Day, if for some of you who don't know about it, it's the first Sunday following Labor Day every year. And it was first established in 1978 by President Jimmy Carter. Each year, the president issues a proclamation to keep the tradition going, which is very nice. The official flower is the little blue forget-me-not. I can't pronounce it correctly, so I'll avoid that, unless I must. It blooms from June to August. It is quite lovely. And I think you wanted me to mention now I didn't know about this, but about 2 weeks in 2019, prior to Grandparents' Day, I received a message on my phone from a woman calling from CBS Studios, WJLA, here in the district. And she had heard about my book and wanted to know if I'd like to be on television for 5, 6 minutes. Of course, I was ecstatic, and I called back right away. And it was wonderful. She said, "Can you come to our studio? I'd like to meet with you before," and all that. And we would like you to speak to us. I think it was, let's see, it was Friday. That's right, the Friday before Sunday. And they were doing a whole program on Grandparents' Day. I said I'd be delighted. I did show up. I was so impressed. I got to see everything behind the scenes. But also simultaneously, right after she called, Lord and Taylor had asked me to present my book as a book signing in honor of Grandparents' Day. So I was really lucky for the weekend. I spent time with my book and also learned a lot about CBS and how they function. And I must say, they're very different from hospital environment. Everything by every second, and I mean everything, or it's gone. So I really enjoyed that, and I have a lot of respect for Jimmy Carter anyway. So I feel what a wonderful thing he did for Grandparents' Day, for both grandmother and grandfather.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Nancy, for all your information. From everything I've read and experienced, it is that grandparents provide maturity, knowledge, stability, and unconditional love to the lives of their grandchildren throughout history. And we may be particularly challenged by the coronavirus, but we as grandparents will find a way to continue to be a part of their lives. Are there any questions or comments, or anybody want to bring up a point about their experience of their own grandparents or your own grandchildren? Okay. All right. Well, I guess
so. I'm sorry. I think Tony is raising her hand. Tony, were you raising your hand to speak? Yes. So if you'd unmute. There you go. Now you're muted. Yes,
I'm on. All right. Well, first thing I wanted to say, that was a really interesting presentation. That was not exactly what I expected. The book is delightful. I have a copy. One of your best friends gave it to me, the Hababanandas.
Yes. Yes, Catherine. Right.
Yeah. So I've looked at the book. And I think I'm going to have to come to Pam for consultation on how you can bring an underachieving granddaughter into at least the passably or more than achieving child by holding a cockadoodle or whatever it is on her lap to overcome the ADD. ADHD, yeah.
Oh no. Well, what's interesting to me is that the father does not like animals. And at all. And animals are the second passion of my life. You know, having taken care of people all my adult life, my real love is animals. And so I've made it a mission that they develop a love for animals, and it has all 4 of them love animals. And I try in little ways of getting that message out to them, how important animals are in the world and to us as humans.
Well, I have my granddaughter with us usually 2 or 3 days a week, and she's on just because of well, the various things that the parents are somewhat split. So I get my son and his daughter together. So I'm not totally in charge, which is interesting. Because we don't always agree, but so we've given over the dining room table, which is quite large, to supposedly that's where she was to do her homework or do her studies or whatever, to be on the computer.
Yeah.
And the dining room table has now become absolutely littered with Lego and other. She's a craft kid. She just loves to make things.
Wonderful.
So she's much happier making things. She's not in the least bit happy about reading and writing and stuff like that. I can't get her to sit down.
Well, I found that my Eloise would rush through, and she'd say, "Oh, I'm done."
Right.
And I'd say, well, we have to go over it. We have to look at it. We have to read the sentence structure. And, you know, but it was one-on-one. She could not get out from under my thumb, you know, just kept on coming back. And, but it was total, that's all I did for Monday through Friday. And I know you've got a busy household. I was just lucky that I only had one child to take care of.
Yeah, well, I only have one, and it's not totally my job either.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to add a different thing, that my relationship with my 5 grandchildren, I think it's totally, I've made it totally the opposite of my grandparents. My grandmothers were both very sedentary. They were somehow old ladies before I ever met them. I know they weren't when they were, you know, teenagers and young people, but they certainly seemed just like people who didn't get off the chair or do anything other than going into the kitchen. And they didn't even do much of that. So I kind of resolved that I would be the sports grandmother. So my grandchildren, I hope, will think of me as the one that taught them how to play tennis and how to run around on the beach and do the athletic stuff. I'm not as good at sitting down patiently with them, reading, because they don't like to sit and read, but we try, but we all have different approaches.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sarah, did you want to share something? I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yes, I was going to say, Tony, I'm ADD, as you probably figured out.
I didn't know that.
And so what was really good for me is that, and my son is that he's also dyslexic, but one of the things that they did at his school, one school, was to not only you read it, but then they would talk about the sentence or they would talk about the class. And I think that if you can distract her in some way, if she's not just looking at the computer, which is hard for any of these kids, it's just let her sit up and walk around the table or something.
Exactly.
Get it out of her. She's got to get it out of her system. I mean, my son, when he was being gone to someone to therapy to figure out what it was, is that she asked him a million questions, and John Henry rearranged the drapes. He was all over her room, and she came back with, I thought, oh God, what's she going to say now? And she came back with, he has an adult language. He's adult language. You feel as though he's very well read, when we both know it's difficult for him. So obviously he's getting information from all over the place. So in other words, just don't despair and just
like that.
Say hi. You know, let's go take a walk. Unless the class, whenever there's a class break, get her out of that table, off and away, and then come back. Because my grandkids get breaks between classes. Does she get a break?
Oh, she gets plenty of breaks, and she takes breaks herself because she's figured out how to toggle on the computer between cartoons and the classroom.
Oh,
well, you got, you know, maybe then you got to sit with her, sweetheart.
She can, and when she's very facile with the computer, she comes upstairs and says, I need to print out something. So she whips at my computer, as long as I haven't given her the password, but then she takes over and figures out 10 different steps to get to whatever it is she needs to print, which is usually just something she wants to color. So there you are.
pretty good.
There you are. Martha, I think I saw your hand. If you'll unmute, please. There you go. Whoops.
All I was going to say is what I put in the comments. All our grandchildren are perfect.
You're a wonderful grandmother.
That's good.
I had unconditional love, and this is our role. Even though, Tony, we're working hard to help them grow up. We love them.
Right.
We love them totally. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Were there anybody else who wanted to make a comment before we end the program for the evening? Karen, yes, so I'll ask you to unmute.
Yes, well, I didn't know how this was set up, but I would love to say what my situation is and see, it's, well, anyway, so my granddaughters are 4 and 6, as different as night and day. And when the first one was born, my daughter is a physician and she didn't get very much time off because it was a new job. And so I was there about 3 days a week. She and her husband could sort of, I don't know how they did it, but somehow they switched it around. And I took the train from Washington, D.C. to Maryland for one night and was there for two days. And we are just, my daughter calls us peas in a pod. Well, that is really, we are not peas in a pod anymore because of COVID. I don't go there, which is just tragic. I won't see them for the holidays. I have advanced cancer, and so I have no immunity, and I really need to stay away. No matter what my choices are, I just can't go to stores, their house. I'm afraid they have quite a social life, wear masks, but they have quite a social life. And so, and then the little one, her other grandmother was there for the first few months of her life. She lives out of the country, and so they aren't very close, and that grandmother isn't very touchy-feely anyway. And so I have not gotten close to that one. And the other one, the older one likes to read, the younger one doesn't. In fact, she won't learn her sight words. The older one couldn't, you know, she would learn her sight words, not that her father would stand for it otherwise, but it's just really hard to have the little one, oops, excuse me.
Bless you.
Do the schooly things, but she's in preschool, so that doesn't matter. And so now they have this this business where they have to do their school at home. And I look at, tell me something. Some of you must see the computer screen that the kids do their lessons on. I mean, they have a class. They call them meetings. And there's 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, whatever. And the stuff looks like Sesame Street or more babyish than that for first grade. And it just seems, and they love the princesses and all that kind of stuff. And when I want them to read the classical books that I loved and my daughter read with me, they don't, it's too, well, like the Boxcar Children. That's just not a cartoon. That's just, those things just don't appeal to them. And so, of course, I bring out the princesses, and there we are. And I look so forward to them having sleepovers at my house and all these things, and they're frittering and with COVID. And well, I just hope, this is a weird, not to get odd about it, but I think I will last another 2 years. And that's about when COVID is going to let us get back. And
well, I think it's a hard time to be a grandparent. It's a hard time to be separated from your grandchildren.
Yes.
Particularly with health issues. We all understand that. Hopefully it won't be 2 years till you'll get to see them again. I think with the good news about the vaccines becoming available, I believe we're hoping for like 6 to 8 more months of this, and then life hopefully will open up a bit. I think, in general, it's hard, and we all know that. And I'm glad you joined us tonight. I thank our panelists. I think it was very interesting, and I thank you for sharing. I'm keeping mental notes for when and if I ever have grandchildren, other than the 4-legged kind.
We'd love to give advice.
And I just want to remind people that our next opportunity for a community to join us in an activity is, as you can see in my backdrop, our community anniversary celebration, coming up December 3rd. And if you're interested in joining us, please visit our website. Much thanks to Carol Kelly and Emily Summers, who have organized this fabulous series of speakers for us. And we will resume our speakers after the first of the year. So if there is nothing else, I thank you all for joining us. And again, much thanks to our panelists. This was a very interesting evening.
Yes.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you for inviting the other villages. I belong to Cleveland Park, so.
Oh, well, we're happy to have you.
Yeah. Glad you joined us, Karen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Good night.
Yes.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Pam and Nancy. Thank you.